Yeah, well, Christmas is almost here and we're facing the highest costs in decades. It's probably fair to say that money is on everyone's mind right now. Well, today we're talking about a hidden problem, often triggered at this time of year, which particularly in this current climate could tip some people over the edge and into significant and insurmountable debt. Spending addiction often goes unrecognised, but experts say it is widespread and a deep-rooted problem. Well, Anne ran up enormous debts after years battling undiagnosed PTSD with what she believed was retail therapy, which is when you just go and buy things to make yourself feel better. Well, earlier I spoke to Anne, who became dependent on spending in her late 20s. She battled out of control debt for more than a decade.
I found myself getting in the pattern of every time I was feeling down, I would go to the shops to cheer myself up. I went from spending what I could afford to then getting my first credit card. And I remember my friend Mick was around at the time being, oh, this is trouble. And I said, oh, no, 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 I'm only going to use it when I really need to. And that day I kind of thought I'm going to use my credit card, see if it works. And then I couldn't stop spending it. It would play on my mind and I would spend and spend and spend until I could spend no more.
Well, luckily Anne got herself out of debt. She got help with counselling and therapy to help her with that. But not everybody can see the light and can see the way to get out of that spending addiction. Well, joining us now is Conor Darcy. He's from the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute, which was set up by the money saving expert Martin Lewis. Hi, Conor. How are you?
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a really, really interesting topic and something that I think lots of people will relate to. But how does that spending addiction manifest itself?
I think it can play out differently for different people. A lot of what we talk about at Money and Mental Health is the cycle that the two issues can form. So when your mental health isn't great, that can leave you feeling down. It can leave you feeling isolated, and often as Anne said, it can be a really way of cheering yourself up. But I think also other conditions like say bipolar, people often get very impulsive and it becomes harder to make good decisions, and that can lead to people really spending more. And again, in this cycle, it can really play out that, once the goods arrive, if you've bought them online or you've taken them home, that can make you feel worse again because you feel a sense of guilt, or when the bills come through, that sense of shame, because there is so much stigma still around these two issues that you then feel worse, and then it just kind of continues that cycle.
Yeah, it's funny. It's something I said to Anne earlier. It's not necessarily that buying that jumper is a bad thing. It's the feelings associated with it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can afford it, if it's within your budget, that's great. I think, unfortunately, we hear from people who end up spending, more than they can afford, and that can lead them into, again, difficult circumstances where you're trying to make ends meet, and with the cost of living, as you were saying, so high already, that extra pressure, if you feel like you're not in control of your spending, that can really become an issue over time.
But I think shopping and even debt actually are so normalised in our culture at the moment. People often don't even realise it's become an addiction. It's just going
Absolutely.
shopping. It's that retail therapy is seen as a fun weekend activity.
Yeah, and it's not something that you can just give up entirely, like cigarettes or something. It is something that you need to do every day to get by. And where you draw the line between where it's healthy and where it's become a problem for you can be really tough for people to realize. And I think when we hear from people, it's often when they do get those really big bills, when it has come out, when like Anne was saying, when a friend sees that something has changed or has gone wrong, or you're concealing your behavior, that's when we do see people really struggle. And that's when turning to debt advice or to your GP for support can be really valuable.
So what sort of things are you seeing? I know you say lots of people turn to you at their most devastating moment, but what sort of things are you seeing and how dangerous is it for people who are addicted to shopping?
I think what we've heard, so we do research on these issues, and particularly we focus on online shopping, because I think, again, from Anne's experience, you can go into the shops and buy a lot, but if you're online, the shops are always open. You can spend money at any time. And I think, yeah, we've heard some really difficult stories of people who've just, spent thousands of pounds that they couldn't afford in a manic period, or when they were feeling particularly low. And then just the pressure that they felt from, the bills coming in, the feeling like you weren't able to cope and like there was no way out. But I think that's the thing that we always really emphasize, that there is no debt problem that can't be solved, and there is lots of support out there if you are struggling with these issues.
Yeah, because when you hear about it, it doesn't seem that easy to stop. I mean, if you want to stop drinking, you stop drinking. I mean, I know that's not easy as well, but when you're in debt, there's another layer. Even if you want to stop, you're already in trouble, aren't you? So what can people do if they are in this situation and they recognise it? What can people do to get help?
I think it kind of depends where you are, and if this is something you're maybe a bit worried about but feels under control, there's lots of good budgeting tools and things out there to help you put into perspective how much you're spending, how much you can afford, and where else that money might go to. But I would say if people really are, struggling with debts, struggling with repayments, and some research we published this week found that, a significant number of people have now fallen behind with payments because of the cost of living. They're reaching out to debt advice to the likes of Citizens Advice or Step Change, or, they offer free support. And it's not just for people who are, really behind on debts. Even if you are struggling, they can help you to, again, think about your budgeting, think about talking to your creditors, and that can be a really positive step forward. But yeah, if people are worried from more of a mental health point of view, and talking to your GP is the best first step.
Thank you, Conor. That's great advice. Thank you very much. Conor Darcy there, speaking to us from the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute. And there's a ton of places you can turn to for help if you are struggling with any sort of money problems, listed on the Institute's website, which is moneyandmentalhealth.org.